I'm going to go ahead and get started. If anybody walked in and didn't have a handout, I've got a stack of handouts here. Thank you. So those right there. All right, so I'm going to get started today. Thank you all for joining us. I was thankful to be able to present for the College of Business's Professional Development Workshop. I've seen the workshops on the webpage and definitely have seen some interesting titles listed, so I'm looking forward to speaking with you all today. My name is James Thomas. I'm an employee at the Center for Leadership Development, so I'm a student employee. I work with events planning and special projects. I'm an undergraduate student in bioresource research with a minor in leadership development. Before starting here at OSU, I finished a certificate in hospitality management with a focus in event planning. And I also worked in a few different industries for about 5 years before I started here. I've worked in sales, I worked in the mortgage industry for a short time, and I also worked for a clothing company doing shipping and receiving and kind of quality control type of things. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Startup of You. You're probably wondering what the Startup of You is. The Startup of You is a book written by the co-founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, and another author and entrepreneur, Ben Casnocha. The Startup of You basically applies attributes and traits around entrepreneurship to your own life. So the Startup of You is not about how to start a small business. It's not just focused on people trying to start a company. It's taking things from entrepreneurship and applying them to your own personal life and your own personal career growth. So there's different things in entrepreneurship like permanent beta, always learning and always adapting, planning to adapt. Planning, you have to plan, you have to have multiple plans. Finding a competitive advantage is also good in entrepreneurship. And network intelligence and working with your network and making sure you're giving to your network. Those are all things that are well attuned to entrepreneurship, and they cover these things in the book. So the idea is that by investing in yourself and applying these attributes, you can leverage your career and move along into the future well suited. They give you lots of tips on how to advance your personal development through LinkedIn. So there's a lot of information about LinkedIn, although the concepts from this book you can use without LinkedIn. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the book and then also about the Center for Leadership Development and the power of groups. So the first section I'm going to talk about today is planning to adapt. And tell a story. How many people here know what Flickr did? Flickr, the photography company, did before it was a photography company. Does anybody know? So Flickr started out as a video game sharing platform. They're like an online multiplayer gaming platform. So players could play online and kind of trade different things like messages and stuff. And eventually they started to trade pictures when they were playing the game. Flickr quickly realized that people liked to trade pictures. And they really liked this photo sharing thing. And so they made the choice to pivot. And they said, let's forget about this multiplayer gaming platform and let's go right to photo sharing. We noticed that people like to tag themselves in pictures, and they designed Flickr, and it kind of revolutionized the way photos are shared and a lot of the features we know today. So that's an example of planning to adapt. Basically, the Startup of You talks a lot about needing to look at your environment around you, be well aware of the technology around you, the changes that are going on in the workplace and in the industry that you're hoping to work in. And you have to plan to adapt. So if you have a plan, you want to make sure that you're constantly revising the plan and making sure it's set up basically to the current events that are happening today. The Startup of You talks a lot about prioritizing learning. So putting learning first. We're all sitting here in a university, so we're all doing a good job of prioritizing learning. But especially for people after college, I do a lot of post-college talks with Startup of You. And the idea is you don't want prioritizing learning to go away once you leave college. Investing in yourself and making sure you're thinking of things that you want to learn, what it is that you need to learn to get where you want to be, making sure you're keeping those things on your mind. So selective randomness is an interesting concept they talked about in the Startup of You. And it's the idea that even by going to this workshop, let's say you meet somebody at the end of the workshop, You start having an interesting conversation, exchange contact information, and start a company 10 years later. We all know that can happen. Selective randomness, I think is really cool because if you look back on your life and you kind of think, how did I get where I am today? You could probably jot down the most unusual of map. You know, I made the decision to go to this conference and then I changed my major. Or I joined this group and I met some friends that I started a company with. So the idea is to constantly induce selective randomness. Of course, you want to analyze the risks and you make sure you're making good decisions. Going to a conference or going to a club, joining a club, putting yourself in an unfamiliar environment is definitely something that they suggest you keep doing. There's a lot of trends in industry right now. Businesses are liking to work around other companies. So, you know, you'll have a cluster of all these different companies so that when they all go out at lunch, they might run into somebody who works for a different organization. They might have a creative conversation and, you know, start a side project or something. The Startup Review talks a lot about ABZ planning. ABZ planning is basically you have a plan A. The diagram up here kind of lays it out. Plan A is the main route. That's like the big island. That's where you're trying to go. Plan B is a plan you have on the side that you can quickly pivot to if plan A doesn't work out. If you find out that you're not suited for the job or the graduate program you're trying to get into doesn't work, you can quickly pivot to plan B. And plan Z is basically your lifeboat. If everything kind of seems like it's not going very well and you need time to regroup, it's good to identify what that plan Z is and find a place where you can kind of regroup and reanalyze your goals. There's no plan C, D, E, or F on this planning to adapt, merely because your plans are always changing, right? Long-term plans are good to keep that focus, but your plans are always going to change, and so it's good to have a shorter-term plan and just be constantly changing that, rather than having this miraculous long-term plan that probably won't work out exactly the way you had planned, because we all know you can't plan too far ahead. So another thing with planning to adapt is to try out new things. So if you're interested in design, but you're not going to school for design, and for some reason you can't change your major, that doesn't mean that you can't start practicing design now. Volunteering, internships, these are all ways to kind of test things out and to gain skills that you might not be able to gain in your current program. And so there's a story about Reid Hoffman, the author of this book and co-founder of LinkedIn, wanted to get more experience in project design. And so he did an internship in project development, and he actually gained experience in that and was able to apply to a company with some experience. So there's all sorts of ways to kind of plan to adapt and make sure your skill sets are constantly evolving to what you want them to be. And feel free to get some pizza. We've got pizza down here for the people who walked in late, and anybody else who wants. Feel free to come down and grab some more pizza if you're hungry. We're going to do an activity right now, so we'll have to get creative. We're going to get into groups of 4 or 5, probably 4 since we have a smaller group here. And I know that these tables don't move, so hopefully we can figure something out. Groups of 4 or 5, and basically just introduce yourselves, major, and what your classes, have some good conversation for a little while, and then answer the question: how do you court selective randomness? So, especially in the college setting, what have you done that has maybe helped you change your major, or changed your focus in college, or led to something cool? Joined a random club, attended a conference that you weren't planning on going, that sort of thing. So basically get together in groups of 4 and discuss how you would court selective randomness.
Well, for example, now
yeah, I just
Oh, I know what that is, yeah,
more often than not.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like same thing, we're shifting around and nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Now it's combined with apparel design, all the design, interior design. Yeah, now it all makes sense.
Yeah.
We're all the same. But I guess like. Yeah. Yeah. Now, obviously, interior apparel,
That's why I love mine.
People are always surprised that like
So like there's cool, but the fun part was is that
Alright, go ahead and try to bring it back together here. Alright. We're gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about what we all talked about. Does anybody have anything they want to share about what was discussed? Anything that stood out? Should I just start calling on groups?
A lot of what we said was never say no. I think that was the consensus. Always be open-minded and meet as many people as you can. Take every opportunity.
Yeah.
Make sure you're just like you can see yourself succeeding in an opportunity. Being positive about it.
Right. Having those yes days, right? Where you hear about something new and then you say yes and sign up. Definitely. Anyone else? Anything stand out?
I'm not in college anymore. But the way that I got this job, I was actually recruiting for Target at the fall career fair. And I had my break, so instead of just going and getting a snack or sitting off by myself, I walked around and talked to people and I networked. And so I met a handful of people, and the person that I ended up finding and connecting with just got fitness.
Very cool. Definitely. Yeah, it's conversations with people. One thing they say in the book, is that it's pretty much all opportunities are connected to people, right? They're connected to somebody. So talking to people is good, definitely. Anyone else want to share? How about one more comment from the discussions? Something that stood out.
Yeah, we were also talking about how like once you say yes to one thing, that typically like rolls into something else. So when you're working on a project with new people, typically like something else, like more opportunities can come out of that. So kind of like network expansion on both ideas, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah. I read a book. To start with you, I decided to pick up the book, and I learned they had a student fellowship in it. And I wouldn't have purchased the book if I hadn't been starting an internship at the Center for Leadership Development. I kind of wanted to find a book that, I was going to be doing a lot of networking events, and I wanted to read a book that would, teach me a little bit about being the entrepreneurship of my own life, and that landed me to speaking to this classroom here today. So one thing definitely leads to another. I agree. We're going to do another workshop, another worksheet. We're going to do another activity. It's on the worksheet. That's what I was trying to say. Does everybody have a worksheet? Yeah, some more. And it's going to be on the back. Go. There's some forms there too. We're videotaping the session. So I'm going to talk about permanent data thinking before we get started. This is essentially, who here knows what the idea of permanent data is, or the idea of beta is, as far as like software is concerned? Can anyone find beta, like a beta version?
Beta version is basically a initial version, which is not final.
Definitely. Yeah, it's basically like Gmail was in beta for I think over 7 years. And so they released the product, people can use it, send emails and stuff. They were constantly looking at customer feedback. They were looking at the market, figuring out what the market needs, and they were constantly adjusting the software. So the permanent beta idea is that we're all works in progress. We should have this permanent beta type of thinking, basically, right? Continually investing in ourselves, figuring out these are my goals, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm not good at, this is what I don't want to do. And we're constantly learning, this is what the market needs. You couldn't have thought about being a software engineer well, you could have probably, but like a mobile app designer, 40 years ago, right? Those jobs didn't exist. But people who are in the industry, definitely, who are doing, mobile app design, they were like, I'm going to invest in myself. This is a cool new technology, and it's going to be the future, and they learned the technology. So basically, investing in yourself constantly is a very crucial step towards, staying hireable, staying successful. And they talk about this in the Startup with You, that we're all works in progress, and we need to do things every day to kind of invest in tomorrow. So by being here in college, that's an excellent way. We're learning skills to use for tomorrow. But there's also extracurricular activities, and there's attending a conference on something that interests you. Basically, there's a lot of ways that we can invest in ourselves, even after college, to make sure that we're always works in progress and be the best that we can be. So this worksheet here, I'd like people to get into groups. We've done different groups in the past. If it's too much of a hassle to move around, we can stick in the same groups. I'll let you all decide. But let's get into groups of 4 again and just work out this worksheet. Write down some rules for permanent data thinking. And then we're going to get together as a group and we're going to discuss these rules.
Everything's segregated. Every time I do something new, I figure out which
A lot of my friends who are like left-handed, they're like artistic, but they struggle because they it's like over your work. A lot of times when you're
Oh yeah, no, you gotta find that.
Yeah, and
That's the problem.
yeah, but then they also feel like they can't really see what everybody is doing or that you're
The teachers don't know this. Yeah, it's all like figured it out.
yeah.
Pretty much just like this.
Yeah.
Problems, but it really bothers me when people are like, oh no, I'm not that type of person. It's like, you're not that type of person because you're that type of person. You can become that type of person. So I'd say like, no self-belief.
of knowing.
And seriously,
You know,
you're
not
not
that,
that,
yeah,
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 I need to go and get my
like,
resume. That's how like, well, how many cards?
knowing that you can improve, you know, your
I'd also say.
An hour.
oh, yeah, being confident.
Those can be slashing confidence.
But it's kind of weird too. You can be humble and then
Yeah, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like,
If I like
Yeah, like, I guess knowing your strengths. Knowing your weaknesses, you mean,
yeah, and it's like finding out more.
And then we call it that, you know, so just thinking about where industries are at, trying to get ahead of them.
So we're getting the rules,
So
I'm
trying
trying
to
to
start thinking where they're at right now, trying to figure out where they're getting.
So it just, I'm just rereading this, April's still like on topic. And just like, how do we, it's just like, always.
I think it's also beliefs.
So I was gonna say something. About success, one more minute.
Yeah, always having a goal.
You can see that they're kind of being harsh.
When they're not, I've been
Buying
that kind of
for like retail and special.
So actually, apparel. All the top companies and like stocks or whatever are all like helping to use their jobs. Yeah, well, like this last one, like they're in apparel, everything is down like 40%. I don't know if you guys are dragging. They follow stocks.
Does everybody have a good list of goals? Let's finish up the conversation, we'll bring it back together.
It's like, you know, I feel like I'm different culture.
All right. If I could have everybody back together, sorry. We're gonna talk a little bit about the rules that we all came up with. So I'm sure we all have some rules in common. Does somebody from each group want to kind of list a few of the rules that they discussed and maybe why they selected them? Try to have a little discussion, hopefully. Does anybody want to list off some rules?
read books, look online, always networking, making habits, stay confident,
Conferences and seminars.
maybe listen to success audio,
Like podcasts and stuff. Definitely. Good stuff.
Yeah, we always ask for feedback, be constantly asking for that. Never think you're actually finished, so always realize that you can always improve on what you have. Reading books and then staying current on your industry trends.
Right. Yeah, staying current on current events and news, so that you can know when it's time to start adding a new skill to your. Good deal. Yep.
Yeah, we talked about setting goals and then self-reflecting upon those goals, and then every day just having daily steps with, just it's a continual process of improving your life, not necessarily just like one day you just wake up and do it.
Definitely. Yeah, saying I've heard is it's always day one. So some companies have that, you treat it like it's day one on the job or day one on the startup if you just started a business. It's always day one. So there's always room for growth and I need to invest and change. Anyone else want to add some things?
I said staying motivated, because you know you can set your goals, but if the person who's more motivated is gonna get a lot more done. And so I think that's important.
Definitely. Sometimes it's
It's
tough.
like finding what motivates you.
Yeah, finding your drive. Definitely. Do you have something to add over there? In the corner? No?
I have one, just maybe avoid fixed mindset labeling them, like, oh, he's the smart one, he's the, just be kind of open-minded to constant improvement.
Definitely.
I think also what ties into that is collaborate with others and understand that your opinion isn't the end all be all.
Yeah,
That it's important to understand others' points and you will probably come up with better outcomes.
definitely. Collaboration. Yep.
So one that kind of ties in with this as well is like, no self-limiting beliefs. Like, don't label yourself as like, oh, I'm not good at this. I'm super good at this, so I don't need to be better.
Right. Definitely. Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I kind of like the one that he came up with. We talked about was Phillips Sport Networks have the capacity to change.
Yep. Good stuff. Definitely, that's a good list. We're gonna talk a little bit about Generation Flux. So permanent beta, basically, we're always works in progress. Different concepts kind of stood out, like reflecting on what you've done, making sure that that it's all work in progress, and keep an open mind, and then being willing to collaborate and having compassion for other people's ideas. Generation Flux talks about skill sets like that are important. Basically, having those skills that are basically transferable. You can take a permanent beta mind state with you wherever you go. You can always be investing in yourself. And what Generation Flux talks about is a generation that is not reliant on the age. It is reliant on your skills in the workplace. So if you have a certain skill set, then you're in Generation Flux. And basically, it started with technology. Technology started to disrupt things pretty quickly, right? All of a sudden, we see computers, personal computers everywhere. We've got the internet. Mobile phones are really the major disruptors. People who are doing software design, for computers are now doing software design for things called apps. We've got the web page. We got all excited about that, and then now we have to have a mobile version of the web page. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we have touch interaction. So there's all these different things that disrupted what a typical job was. And the Startup Review talks a lot about the career escalator and how it used to be, right? So you used to kind of start at the bottom of the escalator and kind of work your way up to the top, get a promotion if you do well, and eventually you're able to retire, and all is well. Nowadays, they argue that this career escalator model is pretty jammed. There's a lot of people trying to get on at the beginning, and there's this idea that maybe it's not quite an escalator anymore at all. There's a lot of zigzag motion going on in careers. So that's what the 4-year career means, basically, is that typically in the past you might start working in a career, work for 30 years, and eventually you're the director and you're at the top of your career. Nowadays, you'll have somebody that'll work for 4 years for a company, and then when they change companies, they might also do something that's known as zigzagging, where they might move from, say, an assistant director to an assistant, software developer, right? And one might say, well, why didn't you just go to try to get that director position? And they might be trying to learn new skills. They might be trying to adapt to the workplace. They might have picked up on a new niche, and then so eventually they're just zigzagging through their career. And so a lot of what we're seeing in our generation is instead of starting and going up on kind of a linear fashion, we're zigzagging all over the place, and we still end up in the same area, right? We're still going to end up probably in a more leadership-oriented position towards the end, but the career path itself might not be nearly as linear. So Generation Flux, there's a webpage. It's listed here on the slide. And I also have a lot of information in those pieces of paper that I handed out to you. There's a lot of links to websites and stuff, and we'll talk more about that at the end. I'm going to talk about networking now. So first thing I like to do is take the word networking and kind of break it down a little bit. It gets thrown around a lot, and a lot of people imagine, fast talking and passing out business cards rather quickly, and maybe even never following up, right? That happens. It happens way too often. So networking itself is basically good relationship building, and really just having real conversations with real people, and it's not really forced, right? So I mean, I'm sure we all have friends that we think of when we think of our network and people we've met along the way. And a lot of that's natural. Like you get along with certain people, you're roommates with people, you work with people, and you get along, and that's how it happens. So it's all based on communication with people. I just kind of wanted to debug the word networking. So some people go to a networking conference and they say, "Am I going to leave with 20 new contacts, right? And hopefully I'll be able to find a job." And those are really all the wrong type of things to be asking. In my opinion, at least, the idea is we already have a network. It's the people that we talk to now, and the people that you have conversations with every week. Your friends, your family, your coworkers, your classmates. That's our network. And instead of trying to get that extra friend or that extra addition to the network, it's all about investing in the network you currently have, right? And when you start to look at second and third connections, the network itself is a lot larger than you might imagine. So the idea is to invest in people and also to approach a networking relationship to the point where you want to ask yourself, what can I give to this person, right? What can I offer to this situation? It's not all about meeting somebody that works at a job you want to work at and trying to figure out how you're going to get them to hire you, right? It's more about just having a conversation and then figuring out what you have to offer. And that will lead to far greater things. And I mean, in my experience, I went through a couple of jobs when I lived in California, and all of them were based on what you would call networking, but it was like kind of reverse networking. I mean, back then, it was all about friendship, and I just had friends, and I tried to be a good friend, and I was offered a job when I wasn't even looking for a job. It taught me very early that true networking is essentially giving and not asking, right? It usually, everything just falls into place. So one thing that I have written on this PowerPoint is the last 5 conversations. Something I heard about at a conference that I was at. It was with a group of friends. We all kind of get together for the last 3 years now and kind of have just a think tank basically, where you just get together and meet up with old friends and talk about things. And it's a wide variety of people, and people can bring their friends and that sort of thing. And someone brought up the idea that a good way to look at your connections is to think about the last 5 conversations you've had with those people. The context, the time, how long you talked, what you talked about. That's a pretty good snapshot of what that relationship entails. So it says a lot about something like if you have a friend in the area, for example, in the same city, and you've only talked on Facebook the last 5 times, and it's maybe you should meet up and have coffee or something, or meet up in person, right? And if you're talking with your aunt or a really good friend that you talk highly of, and all you've talked about is the weather for the last 5 times, you almost wonder like, what is the depth of that conversation, right? And you can also notice like if there's someone you want to get to know more, you can notice like, hey, I'm not really talking to get to know this person, or oh hey, I don't really know like what they're going to school for or what their interests are. Those are all good ways to kind of analyze and start to take a look at your network. So we're going to do another activity, lots of activities in this workshop. This one's kind of fun. It's basically, you're going to pair up with somebody that you don't already know, and through normal conversation, try to figure out who you know in common. So, questions like, what's your major? What clubs are you in? What conferences have you gone to? Research projects that you're involved in. Just through normal conversation, basically, try to figure out who you might know in common. And I'd be glad to participate as well. How's it going? Are you here for the professional development workshop? Yeah, we're filming this too, so that's why that form right there, it's for the filming. How's it going? Can you be my partner? Sure. Cool. Definitely. Yeah, that's some research
Yeah.
That's why you went to that. Just leave it. Did you have always talking about beer. That's what. No, he was talking to me. We're talking like riders over there. He was a good teacher. I liked him. That's what. All right. So, how many people were able to find people that they knew in common? They didn't know each other to start. There we go. Nice. Awesome. So we had some success. What I wanted to illustrate there is that what that means is that it's a small world. No, I'm just kidding. What that means is that we would have been able to be introduced, everybody who you talk to, you would have been able to be introduced to one another through that person, right? And so it's just kind of to illustrate the power of introductions. And so as I wrap up today, because we got to let this other class get in here, I want to leave you with the idea that it's not about being connected. It's about being a connector. So that's kind of something about networking, right? Again, it's more about what you can give. So I'd encourage you to look at your network that you have now and create a network intelligence map. Figure out what all your friends are interested in, what they're going to school for. If you got like 5 science friends and they don't know each other, have a get together, you know? Start a group or have just an informal gathering. You all might benefit from talking with each other. And then be a connector, and then definitely keep in touch. That's very important. I was going to talk about the power of groups, but I know we're pretty much out of time. So I've got a lot of information on my website, and there's various links and websites. So the handout I gave out to all of you, there's a lot of websites on there. A good place to start would be the startup of you at osu.businesscatalyst.com. That's on the handout I gave you, and that's going to have basically links to a lot of workshop material and the LinkedIn group for the Startup of You, as well as the Startup of You at OSU. And then there's also information. I got like PowerPoint slides up on there. And I'd just like to add the Center for Leadership Development is in the Memorial Union. It's above the Java stop. It's in room 203. And we're always glad to talk with students about leadership development. There's lots of different ways to kind of figure out what your goals are. Dive into self-identity. We've got a leadership certificate, portfolio, lots of things to get you organized. And then thank you everybody for joining me today, and thank you Brandy for letting me speak. And if anyone has any questions or anything,